Okay, so let's start while people might still enter the room. So my name is René Arnouts. It's not Antoine van Echtelt, as you see then, but it's because we switched computers. I'm René Arnouts. I'm the Lean Management Institute director here in the Netherlands, and I'm also an executive committee member of the Lean Global Network. One of the people that has set up this amazing event. So. I hope you all enjoy yourselves today for the last 7 hours. And I'm very happy that we have Saskia Klein and Stijn Burgers from the Dutch Agency for Immigration and Naturalization. The IND is what's the name in Dutch. So they will take us through their lean journey. We have 1 hour, so a full hour, because they also have some problems they would like to discuss with the audience. So after they presented, they have 3 hypotheses they'd like to test with you guys. So let's see what they have to share. So welcome, Saskia and Stijn. The floor is yours.
Thank you, René.
Thanks.
Hey, we're delighted to be here. So welcome, a warm welcome to everybody in this meeting. René asked us whether we wanted to tell you something about our own journey and the challenges that we faced, and we really grasped that opportunity because it's a very nice opportunity to speak with a lot of people who are passionate about the challenges that we have about our profession. So it's good to have a vast amount of bright people coming together, and well, we hope to share some of our problems with you, and perhaps you can reflect on them. And we also want to make sure that this is well, we have prepared some hypotheses with you to share and just get some reflections on it. That's also something that we're really delighted about. So we prepared an agenda for you guys. First, well, I'm going to start by telling who we are and what we do. So we're here from the Immigration and Naturalization Services of the Netherlands, but it's good to show what this is about and what we do in the public domain. And then we're going a bit deeper in the challenges and our business model. So how does this work and what is our contribution in the public domain, and what are the challenges connected to it? And then Saskia is going to take over, and she's going to tell about how Lean contributes to the IND objectives and the route that we have taken within within the past years. But let's start by introducing ourselves. Saskia?
Yeah, my name is Saskia Klein. I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt and a team coach. And since April this year, I'm working for the IND.
Nice. Yeah, and my name is Stijn Burgers. I'm what I call a tactical manager within the immigration services. And the tactical manager, yeah, it's more like a senior management position, and I reside within business services. I'm responsible for the expertise for a center of expertise for Lean. And besides that, I also have some other hobbies, like the strategy for the IND for the coming years, and the annual planning and making objectives, and some other projects in the domain, for instance, as process mining, by which means we want to want to take a peek under the hood of our car, just to say. Well, let's start with who we are and what we do. What's important is that the IND, Immigration Services, is the executive body that makes decisions. So we decide on who's going to stay in the Netherlands and who is not. And our work is governed for a large degree by legislation and the rule of law from the Netherlands, but also increasingly in European context and of UN legislation. So we don't make up the laws ourselves. We are simply there to execute what is asked of us. Just to give you a peek in our factory, it starts just simply with someone who does an application. For instance, he wants to stay in the Netherlands, or he has family and he wants to rejoin this family, and they just make an application. Well, we receive it, we process it, we make a decision. Well, in some cases, we also have an appeal if the applicant does not agree with our verdict. And in the end, they get a visa or a green card to work here or reside in the Netherlands. So that's basically what we do. And for our international viewers, Netherlands is, of course, a relatively small country. We have 16 million people and counting. And we reside in the top left corner of Europe. Belgium is underneath, and to the right we have Germany. So we don't have like these very gigantic international borders. We reside within the European Communion, and the borders of the EU are governed in the countries that are at the outskirts of the EU. Just to give an indication, if you go from the top left corner to the top right corner to the lower left corner of the Netherlands, it's 370 kilometers. So it's not that big. But the thing is that it has always been a safe haven for immigrants. It was, in the past centuries, it was a bit swampy, to say it, with a lot of water, which gave protection to people. And we were always quite open and diverse, rich in cultures, and we were trustworthy. So a lot of people always have come to the Netherlands. And if you look at the locations of the IND, which are the blue pointers, well, we are dispersed over the country. And the most important one is the one in the top right corner, and that's Ter Apel. And that's one of the, that's the only center where you can make an application, where you can come in and say, okay, I'm a refugee and I want to be, I need your protection. So that's very important because that's always been one of the biggest centers in the Netherlands. If you look at the history, just to give you a glimpse, we have, after the industrialization area, we have a lot of Belgians and English people have sought refuge in the Netherlands and sought work. In World War I, we have absorbed 1 million Belgians in this very small country. World War II, a lot of Jews. In the 50s, a lot of work migrants. In the 70s, people from the overseas colonies, from Suriname, and also earlier from from Indonesia. And of course, in the past years, in 2015, we have also seen that a large of influx from Syria, which leads to twice the normal intake that we have. So it was quite a big crisis for us. Well, if you look at the timeline, I've depicted all the legislation that's applicable to our work in a timeline. In 1849, we started with the first Aliens Act. So that's governed by who is welcome, who is allowed to cross our borders and who is not. In general, it was if you have a passport and you have money, then you're welcome. But if you don't have one of these, if you looked very trustworthy or you had very considerable skills, then you would also be welcome in the Netherlands. That's always been part of our pragmatic character, I assume. In 1892, since we had now rules for who can cross the border, then we also ask ourselves, okay, but if you're living inside this border, who is a Dutchman and who is not? So we've defined if you have been born from a Dutch mother or you're a child of a Dutch father, then you're Dutch. So it's accession that makes you Dutch in the. In 1951, after of course, the terrible times in World War II, but also the downfall of the large colonies, you would see that there was a large migration stream across the world. And at UN level, there have been made the UN Refugee Convention, and it defines when you are a refugee or not. So under which conditions are you a refugee? And if you're a refugee seeking shelter, then what rights do you have? So this is a very important document for us because it outlines how we do our work. Then in 1994, the IND was founded. Well, it's not the case that before that there wasn't some sort of immigration services, but it was just part of one of the ministries. And why it's important that we mentioned here is because the making of legislation and the execution was in one hand before 1994. And that also gave troubles, because if you process a claim, how can you, why not change the regulations that you make yourself? So that was very difficult. And in 2000, we have a new aliens impact, which consolidates also a lot of the prior legislation. Well, of course, we're not like in a law convention here, so we're not going to talk a lot about the law. But what we want to stress here is that our work is governed by this legislation, and it determines how we execute our processes. And it has been stacked in the past years. So we have the UN regulation. We have increasingly more regulation on EU level, which defines like 80% of what we do. And we also have some Dutch legislation, but it's minor compared to what we have on international level. And we've seen that it stacks, it accumulates. We need to account for more and more things in what we do. And it defines what questions we need to ask, how we process it, what steps we take. So a lot of autonomy in our processes is decreased because of that. We just simply need to execute the law. So that's why we wanted to stress it. And that's it about the law for now. But let's have a peek under the hood of the car. So some statistics about the IND. In 2021, 40,000 people have sought asylum in the Netherlands. 59,000 people wanted to become a Dutch, so they're not seeking asylum, they just want to become a Dutch citizen. And we have 94,000 applicants for people who want just to work here, to study here, or really, so the expats, etc., and the students. And we've also processed 33,000 law cases. So people who appealed to our verdict, and in some cases also went to the court to defend it. So also going to court and do cases is always part of our job. It's also primary process. Well, if we look at the contribution in it, 30% of the request to stay in Netherlands, so is for seeking shelter. 24,000 is the first application, and 13,000 is what we call nareis. So one member of the family has come to the Netherlands. That's the first application, and then 13,000 people also wanted to join and make their family complete. Then the regular stream, as we call it, 22,000 people came here because they are very talented, have very good skills, just like what I told in 1849. If they have skills and have talent, they are welcome. So these are the expats, 20,000 students, and 42,000 people for family and for family reasons, but not seeking shelter. Well, that's just what we process. And just to also give you a glimpse about what we do in our services, we have 40,000 people that visit our website, 52,000 phone calls, 4,000 counter visits, and 3,700 emails that we process monthly. So there's a lot of work to be done at our office. This is with who we work. So you see a lot of parties that we are responsible for making sure that the refugee chain or the naturalization chain is actually working. And in the center you see the IND, COA, en dienst terugkeer en vertrek. The IND, like I said, is only responsible for making decisions. So we get applications, we decide, and that's it. But the COA, the Centrale Opvang voor Asielzoekers, they are responsible for the homing of all the people. So if you get asylum, then you need a house, then you need to build your own life in the Netherlands, and that's what the COA is responsible for. And a lot of all the challenges is now also pressing on COA because they're unable to find shelter for them. So a lot of people stay in the asylum centers. And then dienst, terugkeer en vertrek. Well, if we know that someone is not getting their Dutch citizenship, then dienst, terugkeer en vertrek makes sure that they are returned safely to where they come from. And besides it, there are a lot of other parties like the ministries, the police, the local municipalities, and also our Department of Security and Justice, which makes all the legislation. So it's very complex chain because in all the applications you will see, okay, in this case we need this party, in that case we need that party, and all the value chains of all these parties needs to be aligned. But it's a web. It's so complex. It's so difficult to administer. So well, sometimes it's quite stressful. And what we have seen is that the entire chain ends up in this result. And I want to stress these are not the problems solely of the IND. These are the problems of the refugee chain in total. So these are pictures which are taken at our main center in Ter Apel. And if you come as a refugee, you go to Ter Apel and say, okay, guys, I'm a refugee, I seek shelter, help me process my claim. And you see that we have tents in front of Ter Apel because we're unable to provide a home and shelter for all the people which are in the which wanted to enter the center. So we get people coming over day and night. So the top left picture, you see that sometimes at night refugees find our center and want to enter. What was most troublesome for me, I think, was also that Artsen zonder Grenzen, the Médecins Sans Frontières, how do you call them in English? I don't know. Doctors Without Borders. They provided medical assistance to refugees. But it was the first time that the Doctors Without Borders operated in the Netherlands. Because normally we have a very well working healthcare system, but apparently we were unable to cope with it. And it was, well, I think it was stunning. That in the Netherlands, we are unable to provide housing and unable to provide medical assistance. But you also see the other side of it. So in the lower picture, you will see that there are also a lot of protesters about it. The people have difficulties with the amount of people that are coming here and all the troubles that it causes because it's not regulated correctly. So in the municipalities surrounding our centers, we see a lot of people who don't want these problems anymore, or have a problem with immigration in general. That's also possible. But the problems, well, not to downsize it, but we see that also other immigration services are having difficulties with it. So, for instance, in Britain, we also see a high influx, of course, from people from Ukraine, but also from their overseas, their prior overseas territories. So immigration is big. There are a lot of, there are just a lot of people fleeing from home and seeking shelter elsewhere. So what we wanted to do is just to give a reflection of our challenges of our business model. So we have made a weighing scale, which is balanced. On the left side, we have our challenges are apparent. We have a higher and also a very volatile influx. So we have the war on the European continent. So a lot of people from the Ukraine, of course, are coming to the Netherlands. But we also have Afghans, 5,000 Afghans that have entered the Netherlands. Well, perhaps also Russians are coming this way. We don't. We have seen some, but we anticipated it might be higher, but we cannot tell because these people don't tell us where they're coming and when they are approaching the Netherlands. And this is an annual graph of the influx. So you see, in September we started with 4,000. Then in December it was 2.5, and in February it was 1,500. And then later in the year it was increasing, then a bit down, and then increasing again. And the latest trends see that for all the products that we are delivering as IND, we see more and more demand. The problem with asylum seekers is that we don't know when they are coming. They just travel to our application center, put up their hand and say, okay, hi, I'm seeking shelter. So you see them the moment they stand at your gate. Of course, we make predictions and we have models saying, okay, these are the geopolitical problems that we have. And we anticipate that so many are going to this country, so many are going to that country. But the thing is that we cannot really predict it. Well, there's one thing I always learned that is really certain. If it's good weather, then at that day, there are more asylum seekers because it's a good day to come to Ter Apel. That's one of the things that we know. And on macro level, of course, we also have some estimations, but they are very difficult in predicting on monthly basis or daily basis what the influx will be. That's difficult because the operational plannings, how many people you know need at one moment, you need to have that in very high detail, and that's a problem. And we don't control the influx, so we don't make legislation. We have EU and UN legislation that determines a lot of what we do. And the problem is that we're held to it. We don't change it. So the influx is the influx. There's no.
What is your capacity, Stijn? What is your capacity on a monthly basis? How many refugees can you help or asylum seekers?
Well, for asylum, we know that our annual capacity is about 22,500 applications. But we see that there are more people that are seeking shelter. But based on the persons that we have as an organization, we know that we can commit to 22,500 applications. But the influx is higher. And the problem always is, okay, we have influx now, and which is high, and then a month later it can be a bit lower, but it's difficult.
Difficult to.
Yeah. So on the other side, we have other challenges, which counterbalance a bit with the influx, because we have a large pressure on execution. We have some new investigations from the Dutch government that ask us to focus more on the actual situation of the application of the applicant, which is of course difficult because standardized work is of course more efficient. But now they want us to process them case by case. And sometimes we also have that in the process of application that the politics say, okay, now we want to focus on this, and now we want to focus on that. But sometimes we get the feeling that they think that we live in a world that you can define yourself. But you have restrictions in your process. Well, we have, due to the high pressure, we have a sick leave of 9%. COVID is perhaps coming up, which gives restrictions on our physical services, and like I said before, we have law and legislation that we have very little room in changing. But the conclusion that we also have is that we have limits to our growth, because we can. Well, next year we want to grow with a certain amount of FTEs, which is approaching between the 700 and 1,000 FTEs. And it's gigantic for an organization with 5,000 people. How are you going to absorb this amount of people? How are you going to find them in the tight labor market? Are we as recruitment and do we have the capacity to attract all these people? So that's quite stressful for us. And one of the things, and then to finalize the challenges, we are financed per product that we deliver. So one product, that amount of money, but you don't get markup funding. So it's not that we can have a flexible pool of people that we can just hire all the time. And in some cases, if there's a high influx, well, we can use them. But if it's a low influx, well, they don't do anything because there's no work to be processed. But we are not financed that way. So the problem is that we cannot. We are not financed by the politicians, because it leads that we cannot have like a flexible pool of people available for our work. So, to be honest, it made us a bit sad.
It's quite a challenge. It's good that you're scoping it. It's setting the stage.
Yeah, so it might be a bit of a story before we come to our questions that we want to ask to the publics, because we have one hypothesis. If you look at the IND, it's if you describe it's just it's an organizational model. It's a collection of our public services for the general use. We have our the services that we deliver, the processes that we have defined as an organization to make that work, all the people that we've hired and put in the hierarchy, and all the managers that we have appointed to govern that work, the systems that we have, our computer systems that we have developed, the offices that we have, and all the data that we have gathered. That's our organizational model. And sometimes we just think, okay, perhaps this organizational model is very difficult to define. So it's because of the high influx that we cannot control, it's very difficult to make a scalable business model that fits the influx properly. So our hypothesis is that we have an inherently unstable business model. And that this is very difficult to find an optimum business model that serves all the influx in any given conditions. And that's why we were very glad to be here, because perhaps people have encountered the same challenges or have some recognition of at least some aspects of it. So we're very curious if there's someone that's in this audience that has coped with the same challenges, and perhaps he can shed some light on it. So, that's our question for the chat. Is there someone who has encountered the same challenges, and what was your response to it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So. People in the audience, please use the chat. One, do you recognize this? Have you ever seen a similar situation where there's a huge influx, but the organization is so tied to all kinds of laws and legislation that it's hard to cope with it? And second is, what would your response be? What could we do? What advice could you give to Saskia and Stijn? So please take a minute and type in your response. So first, do you recognize that? Have you ever seen an organization like this coping with this high influx and difficulty to cope? So let's see if anyone has an idea of, or is this just off the chart? I doubt it. I mean, the Netherlands is not the only country coping with
Yeah.
refugees, asylum seekers. So
If you read the newspapers, you see it everywhere. Huh? It's really a global.
yeah, it's a global phenomenon
Yeah.
for sure. So how do we cope? So Madhu, you say hello. Good morning, Madhu. So do you have any idea? Have you seen an organization like this coping? I think most people struggle with, well, this is quite different from what we are familiar with.
Yeah.
Many people from organizations. I also think what we see is hospitals that can be comparable. That and also in the Netherlands, that
Yeah.
higher demand, and is also part of your chain. I think coping with people. Madhu says, I've worked with a certification organization with the primary processes having differing influx over the year. Yeah, so seasonality
Yeah.
with fixed resources.
Yeah, well, if you work for a commercial organization, you would always say, okay, we're just going to hire the prices, in cases that we have a high volume. But in this case, well, we just have to process it because it's our work. And on the other hand, there's little room to change it. With fixed resources, I see what Madhu says.
Sitske asks questions. To what extent are you using data from the past to make predictions on influx?
Yeah, of course, we have like econometric models that predict the influx. So we know that's a very unstable geopolitical situation. Well, we make estimation how many Ukrainians are coming, how many Russians, and what other areas might be affected. But that's like more a macro model. So that doesn't help you in making operational plannings for a month or even on daily basis.
Yeah.
So we do have them, but to be honest, the validity of it is and the practical use of it is limited. That's what we experience. Yeah, but we would like, of course, to be able to predict it more. But yeah.
We also get some answers from Madhu, who's saying the one thing we found that there was too much ping pong going on in the primary process. How is that within the IND? So do you see a lot of steps in the process, or is it multi-task teams set up? Or how does this work?
Perhaps Saskia, you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, I think, well, then I'm talking about not the organizations we work with, but inside IND. And what you see is that we are organized in kind of silos in Ireland. And then you see a lot of ping pong in the respect that you're not sure what the other direction or the other unit wants to have, or the other team members. And then it's about quality. It's about a lot of not first time right. And then inside the company, you see quite a lot of ping pong, as we can say it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Madhu says one thing they did was to shift to the left to ensure that the certification process was much more predictable. Madhu, I'm not completely sure what you mean with shift to the left. Probably reduce the lead time, but please, if you can clarify it a bit more, that's good. Michael Scholl says use different modes like high, medium, low levels of demand and have standards set up for each mode. So would that be a possibility? Good idea. Not sure how that will work, but it's certainly something you can look at. Chris says, yes, commercial organizations can handle seasonality. They create their own financial buffers. That is the difficult thing with the IND. I think you're completely flat in your number of people. And yes, you can hire more people, but it's not enough to cope with the huge variation in demand. Sietske says, to what extent can you use standard processes, for example, for certain groups of immigrants? I think that's so
Yeah.
good.
Well, we have for regular services, as we call them, so these are people not seeking shelter. We have an audience-based process. So for people that come as expat, it's a different process than for people from that want to become a Dutch citizen, because they have relatives living here. So we have done that. What is perhaps good also to mention is that we do have one process that we call for refugees, that we call Spoor 3, track 3, and track 3 is not active. And track 3 is basically, just to say it unpolitically, it's a pink glasses. So every applicant becomes, we're going to trust them instead of that we want more and more evidence. So we do have that in place, but the thing is that it's not active, and it can only be active if the minister gives us a permission to do so. Yeah, but at current it's not active.
And have you looked into, can we simplify these processes, let's say the standard processes, even more, so we can free up capacity to deal with the more complex cases?
I think we have some opportunities to do so. So our work at the Center of Expertise is it's not done yet. So process improvement and getting more efficiency out of it, more standardization, less handovers. These are things that can still be done. Yeah.
Okay. Then Ruth asks a good question, I think. You're looking at your own capacity, but you are part of a whole value chain with capacity restraints in the other parts of the chain. So why are you just looking at the I&D? Why wouldn't you just go out and see if you can create a value stream overview of the entire chain, maybe for one product family, so to say, in manufacturing terms, but for one specific group, how could you simplify this as a whole? So good point. Maybe that's something you can also look into. Or is that too difficult?
Well, we do have ambitions to do so. But the challenging thing is that, well, we're much more convinced also that because we're more on the front part of the value chain, that if we are able to optimize, well, we want to be able to be able to deliver ourselves before we go in the chain. But perhaps it's not a good assumption, and that people can advise it otherwise. But it's just one thing that we do want to do, but we still think we're not far enough to do so.
So clean up your own street before you clean up your own mess before you start going out. But in some cases, it might be valuable just to check the entire stream, because you don't know what the effect will be. So
yeah.
Let's go. Okay, Madhu responded. He said, okay, with the shifting to the left of information needed to reduce risk of rejection later. Okay, and secondly, the throughput of the organization is determined by the bottleneck. So if it is in front end where the applications are coming in, then that needs more resources compared to others. Yeah, so balance throughout. So maybe do a bit of work there. That's also a good idea, Madhu. Thanks. Then Michael Shaw says, with no flexibility in resources, the high, medium, low modes could include expected failure and backlog and risk rates. Key is maybe to set expectations.
Yeah.
Henry is adding to Ruth, it will be more work balancing. Yeah. Chris gives 3 fundamental reactions for unstable demand: capacity, inventory, time. Do a deep dive per element, what can be achieved. Decouple tasks, prepare, etc.
Yeah, thanks. Perhaps it's good as also that we give the word to Saskia
Yeah, and then one last point from Madhu. Suggest to have the value stream mapping with lead time, process time, percentage correct, a complete and accurate waiting time, and so on. But you probably already did. So Saskia, stage is yours.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think in my presentation, you will see a little bit more about Lean, and I can relate to the answers given at the moment. So first, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the... here.
Yeah.
I just wait a sec for my... Yeah, that's it. Okay, well, before I'm going to talk about the challenges Stein described and how Lean can contribute to those to face those challenges, I would like to tell you a little bit more about the history of Lean at the IND. And first of all, we started more than 10 years ago, the Lean journey, and it started in a traditional way. So first there were pilots, and then it became a project, and it was followed by a huge program implementation. Well, and probably, as we all know, such a program is not always very successful, in the sense that what we saw is that everybody had to participate, but there were also people who said, well, I don't have a problem. I don't perceive that I have a problem that I have to work with, but still they had to change the way they worked. So as an answer of the IND, he said, well, we are going to establish a network organization embedded in the hierarchy. And at that time, around 200 belts were trained. So yellow belts, green belts, and black belts. And but about 2 years later, they saw that the network organization wasn't quite capable of driving continuous improvement. So then the decision was made to establish a Lean Center of Excellence for embedding permanent Lean support and intensify continuous improvement. And it's resorting under the business operations. It consists of 16 black belts and green belts. And we work closely together with the other belts in the organization. And well, Stein is the manager, technical manager of the team, and I am one of the black belts. So as a center, we wanted to be sure that we were still aligned with the objectives of the organization, of the IND. And about more than a year ago, Ernst & Young did a research, and the research was about identifying problems, obstacles that prevented proper functioning of the IND. And the result was an IND change assignment. And the focus of the assignment was about being more reliable, being more responsive, and being more innovative. And if we link that to Lean, then you can more or less say that being more reliable is about management, operational excellence. It's about keeping your promise. It's about being predictable, keeping your promise, but also taking responsibility. And it's about telling what you can and can't do. If you look at responsive, being more responsive, it's about the voices, not only the voice of the customer, but also the voice of the employee, and knowing what's going on with the other organizations you're working with, and knowing what is going on with your colleagues. So what do they need to perform well? And being more innovative is about process improvements. It's about continuous improvements, step by step. It's about making your work more efficiently, more pleasant. That's more or less the relation between the focus of the change assignment and how we can add value to that. And then the Lean Center, well, we also wanted to know how the company, how employees and managers, what they thought of us, how they perceived our added value, especially if you look at the history of how Lean was implemented. So we did a small customer arena, and we conducted a survey. And we also talked to the board. We had a session with the board, and we wanted to hear from them how they perceived us and how they thought we could help with the change assignment. Well, and then the results. How can Lean contribute to face the challenges? Well, first of all, management is having clear objectives, cascaded goals, and result-driven steering, which means that we continue to experiment with end-to-end process governance across organizational boundaries by introducing different roles, for example, process ownership. And what we also do is reinforcing operational management by involving employees and operational managers. So more bottom up. Now it was quite top down, but they said you should involve the people more and be involved in development of new leadership model. It's very fresh. So we try to help out with also kind of lean leadership or coaching leadership. The other thing is process optimization. It's about free up time, shorten lead times, improve quality. So the things we all know, of course. We continue to reinforce process improvements by driving end-to-end thinking. So that's also about the ping pong idea. It's about that people realize that they are part of a chain and their actions can have consequences down the line. So we are in the middle of that process. We start to use process mining as a tool. So it's I'm very curious what that will be the results for us. And intensify lean training. That keeps on being important, that people learn to see waste, etc. And the last thing is our Lean Center of Excellence. We play an important part in stimulating, educating, supporting, and connecting employees and managers. What you hear from in the customer arena, but also from the board, they said you have a bird's eye view and you can connect people in the company. So they really see our added value. And what they also said, be more visible, because some parts of the IND, they know what we can do and they know our added value, and they come to us if they have a problem. And other parts of the IND, they don't know that we exist, or maybe they don't want to know that we exist, but that's a little bit about the history. So that's a nice task for us. The last slide. Well, we would like to know what your thoughts are on the next challenges. First of all, it's about how can we implement process ownership while the organization is organized in units. That's still quite we have a question about it. We would like to know how you dealt with it. And the other thing is lack of time. It's kind of catch-22. How can you free up time for continuous improvement while, as we can say, the house is on fire? So, I'm really curious what your experiences are with this issue.
So, dear audience, please, can you provide us with some answers? How can you get process ownership real in the organization, and how can we find time to really do this? Because I think the picture shows that managers typically don't think they have time to cope, or even employees. There's so much work. So what can we come up with?
And often they're also quite happy that within their silo, it's actually working well. And then they're quite happy that it has been arranged, at least for their part.
So on my island, I'm okay.
Yeah.
So please leave your ideas, your answers in the chat. We'll wait a second for people to get going. This must be something that more people are familiar with. So your management team, maybe a question in between to you guys. How involved are they in this process? Because you're a tactical manager. Does it mean you're in the the highest management team?
Oh, we have the management team for the entire IND, which is the board of directors, sort of say, and then per director you have an entire unit, and I'm part of the management team of one of these units, and we are very much committed to solving this. But sometimes it's difficult for us just to, in a conceptual way, figuring out what to do. So if you want to experience what true troubleshooting and fighting fires looks like, then you're very much welcome, because we're very skilled at it. But we have difficulties in bringing forward some conceptual bigger changes.
Yeah.
And so we are very much committed to it. It's actually very special to be part of an organization that it's in the forefront of the political arena. So everybody thinks of something about immigration. Everybody has an opinion about it. It was one of the topics that was solved very late in the formation process of the new government, because this was the subject that they could not get on one line to it. So it underlines how much.
So the hot potato. So
Yeah.
is providing some answers. Process improvement, create a small task force that will work end to end and test it out. So maybe a bit more direct. Use, for example, design thinking to promote creative thinking about solutions. Also a good one. Ruth, maybe the directors from IND like to take a look at other parts of the government. There are several experiments with Agile, Scrum, Kanban principles. Main principles for the IND: no silos, but organizations in value chains. So that would also, I believe, the management team of the IND must own the lean philosophy and define metrics and measure them. So some first response on that.
Yeah.
So for the last one, we do encourage the use of metrics on throughput time and quality in our operational processes, but we're a bit on the beginning. So we are used to driving more efficiency and stock levels, because that's what we used to always monitor. So we try to make a shift to more process steering. But I think we've just started that transition.
Yeah.
But I think here what Ruth and Madhu and also you are focusing on is how can you make it work? So take the managers on visits to other organizational parts like the Rijkswaterstaat, Ministry of Infrastructure, and many others, how they cope with similar kind of things. Because if they can't see it, if they can't feel it, they will not believe it.
Yeah.
So that is part of the difficulty. You can come up with a beautiful, holistic idea, but it's not going to fly unless people really experience this can work for us. I think that's important messages that you're getting through in the answers. So more on the social and less maybe on the process side to start off with, but get people engaged. So use cross-silo Gemba walks. There's another idea of Sietske, and Madhu says the next to business metrics, we need people engagement metrics.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
So, but it also looks like you do need a bit of a bigger thing, some different thinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to cope with a huge variation. How can you cope with it? It's not working in one way. It's also the idea that was posed before: high, middle, and low variation. So how do you cope with it? You need to come up with something else, because otherwise it's not going to work.
And I think there's support from the top of the company of IND, And at the moment, we are experimenting with a part of the process to have end-to-end governance. So we are in the middle of this experiment. And if you hear people from different units and you have workshops with them, they are really pleased to talk about it and listen what's going on in another team or other unit. But then you have the catch-22, because they want to, but they don't have the time. So then they see what they should, they learn how to think in a process way. So being process-minded.
But maybe there you could be a bit more challenging. So if you cannot find the time to fix this enormous problem, like spend 2 days or 3 days together, if you can't spend this time, you're not gonna be able to solve the problem.
Yeah. That's
Be a bit brave with it, or be smart and hire a guy like Jim Womack to give a talk like he did yesterday. He was pretty blunt. He was pretty straightforward. Or Michael Ballet, don't per se give the message yourself, but maybe someone else can give this message to them or shake it up. One last one is I would leave the process technical, focus on lean philosophy and lean management using Kata from Madhu. So getting them into another routine, not per se talking about it, but doing it, so applying it. And so maybe, because I think we're close to finishing time, but I once took a management team to a Toyota organization, and that opened their eyes. And in some cases, Toyota is not very open, or it's too far away for many people to really learn from. But you can see, is there a model like Ruth also spoke about? Maybe you can visit other management teams in the government where they've done some of this stuff, and that would help, because that's going to be key. It's also what Sitske here is posing. Management commitment to transformation will be key. Otherwise, you'll have a beautiful lean excellence center, but you're kind of the excuse of management. It was meant in a nice way. Typical Dutch bluntness.
No, but it's good, because we really want to have reflections, because it's challenging for us, and we don't say we are here to present a success story.
No, it's
just want to learn from what you have.
Hear a lot of success stories. You're brave enough to expose and to show what your real issues are, and they're serious problems. We can see it every day in the newspapers, on the television. So lots of problems with this assignment or this challenge. So I'm very thankful and grateful that you were willing to share this story with us. Thank you to the audience. Maybe some last remarks from you guys, Saskia, Stijn.
No, go ahead.
We were really grateful for having this opportunity. Thanks for that.
Yes.
So thank you to all the participants. Thank you for all your comments and advice. We will collect them and make sure that Saskia and Stijn get all these so they can have a think about it. And again, thanks a lot, and hope to see you soon. And we're going to change over to the main stage. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.